That Sunday afternoon, Esperanza was holding the still warm glass dish of peach cobbler when she heard the words that would change her life forever. Why is she still alive? The laughter that followed wasn't loud, just sharp enough to break something deep inside her. What she discovered after this humiliation will shock you, and how God transformed her pain into the Patterson family's greatest victory isn't just a story. It's a miracle never before told. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, subscribe to the channel to discover how God can transform your greatest rejection into your greatest blessing. Press the bell, because what Esperanza kept in her heart and the secret she discovered about her own past will make you rethink the meaning of the word divine vengeance. Grab your cup of coffee, sit back and relax, because together we'll discover how a 73-year-old woman, betrayed by her own family, became God's instrument for the greatest turnaround the town of Salem, North Carolina has ever seen. Salem was one of those small North Carolina towns where everyone knew their neighbors by name and by the stories they didn't tell. Old red brick houses, oak trees that had stood witness to 3 generations, and the constant smell of apple pie wafting from the kitchens in the late afternoon. Hope Patterson had lived in that same house for 60 years. She arrived there at 13, an orphan, to live with the family that raised her. She married Thomas Patterson at 22, a man of faith and hard work who built furniture for local families. They raised 2 children within those walls, Samuel and Ruth. They planted the Have you ever lived in the same place for so long that the walls seem to hold your most intimate prayers? When Thomas died of a heart attack at age 68 3 years ago, Esperanza thought she knew every corner of that house. She thought she'd read every letter tucked away in the desk drawer, seen every yellowed photo in the albums, opened every trunk in the attic. I was deeply mistaken. Samuel's birthday party was taking place in the backyard. Esperanza had spent the entire morning preparing her famous peach cobbler, the recipe she'd learned from her adoptive mother, the one Thomas called a little piece of heaven on earth. She arrived through the back gate, as she always did, carrying the still warm dish in her gloved hands. That's when he heard Joanna, Samuel's wife, whisper to her sister-in-law, "Why is she still alive? We could have thrown the party without telling her." The soft laugh that followed was like a needle piercing his chest. Have you ever felt your heart break when you heard someone you love talk about you as if you were a burden? Hope didn't back away. She didn't run away. She walked through the yard as if she hadn't heard anything. She passed the party lights, the picnic tables, the faces that didn't turn toward her. Some were her own flesh and blood, some were strangers, but none of them truly smiled. "Hi, Esperanza, we didn't know you were coming," Joanna said with that forced smile she wore when guests came. "I brought cobbler," Esperanza replied simply. No one offered to take the dish. She found a corner at the end of the table. The plastic chair creaked under her weight. Her back ached, but she held herself upright. The air smelled of grilled meat and lemongrass. Music blared from someone's stereo. They laughed, ate, drank. She watched. Samuel made a toast at one point. "To the family," he said, raising a beer. As the glasses clinked, no one looked his way. The children, her grandchildren, ran past her 3 times. None of them stopped. None of them said, "Hi, Grandma." She wondered if they still recognized her without her apron or grocery bags. Joanna finally approached, leaning in with that tight smile she wore when cameras were around. "Want a plate?" Hope looked at her. "I'm fine like this." Joanna waved too quickly and walked away before she could say anything else. Esperanza stayed until the end. She helped stack plates, folded napkins, wiped the sticky table with damp paper towels as the others began to head home. Then she picked up her glass dish, still warm from the afternoon sun, and left. Not with anger, not with sadness, but with a decision growing in the chest like a seed planted in good soil. Have you ever felt so invisible that you began to question whether God even knew where you were? The next morning, Esperanza made coffee in her smaller coffee maker, just 1 cup. She sat at the kitchen table by the window, the same table where Samuel did his homework when he was little. His legs were too long for the chair, his tongue hanging out when he tried to solve math problems. Back then, he needed her. Now, he just tolerated her. Barely. He didn't speak to anyone that Sunday. The cobbler dish was washed, dried, and put away. He left the house only once, to get the mail. But he didn't open the envelopes. I wasn't ready to see Samuel's name on the electric bill again. That house, their house, had been his once. At least the down payment, $40,000 from his retirement savings. 5 years ago, when he believed in second chances and family investments. Just to get you started, he'd said. No strings attached. Apparently, no place at the table either. The paperwork was still in the file. She'd never needed to consult it before. But now, she wanted to see it. Not the numbers. She knew the numbers. But the names. Whose name was on which document? He pulled out the folder marked Samuel House. Inside, he found the purchase agreement, the deed, and the signed letter he had written, donating the money without expectation of payment. "Because you are my son," he had written. It hurt to read that line, more than he expected. Have you ever reread your own words of love and felt like you were too naive? That night, he called a woman named Helena. She wasn't exactly a friend, but she was insightful. She'd worked for years in probate and estate law. They'd met at Bridge Club years ago and kept in occasional contact. He said he had questions about properties, donations, and inheritance documents. Helena didn't ask why. She just said, "Come tomorrow, bring everything." Hope slept well that night. No pills, no pacing around the house. Not peace exactly, but a kind of alignment. Like when you finally understand God's will for your life. In the morning, he dressed carefully. Ironed dress pants, real shoes, and a good coat, even though it was too hot to wear. When you're about to change the course of your life, you wear something with buttons. Helena's house smelled of lemon disinfectant and mint tea. She looked at the folder, flipped through the documents, and gave a soft grunt. No written expectations, no shared title. It's theirs now. You donated it. I know, Hope said, but that doesn't mean I'm powerless. Helena explained what could still be done about bills, wills, and powers of attorney. You can't take the house back, she said, but you can make sure they don't get anything else. That was enough. She handed Hope a checklist. Hope folded it in half and put it in her bag. That night, he sat back at the kitchen table. No music, no television, just the silence she used to hate, but now welcomed like an old friend. He took out a blank sheet of paper and wrote a name at the top, Samuel. Then he drew a single line across it. But God had bigger plans than she could imagine. It was on a rainy Wednesday that Esperanza decided to go up to the attic for the first time since Thomas's funeral. She was looking for Christmas decorations, those rag dolls she had sewn herself in the early years of their marriage. The attic smelled of mold and memories. Boxes were stacked like towers in an abandoned city. Furniture was covered in sheets that looked like ghosts waiting to tell their stories. He was rummaging through a box of old photographs when he found it. Hidden among faded images of Christmases past and forgotten birthdays was a yellowed, sealed envelope with his name written in a handwriting he didn't recognize. Have you ever found something addressed to you that shouldn't be there? Inside the envelope was a letter dated 1962, 3 years before she married Thomas. The letter was signed by Margaret Whitfield, a woman Esperanza only knew by sight, who had died decades earlier. Dear Hope, if you're reading this, it means God has decided it's time for you to know the truth. You're not an orphan, as you've always believed. Your mother, Elizabeth Whitfield, was my sister. She had to give you up for adoption when you were 6 months old. Not for lack of love, but for lack of choice. The child's father was a married man of influence in the town. He threatened to destroy our family if she tried to raise you alone. Esperanza had to sit on the dusty attic floor. Her heart was beating like a war drum. Elizabeth died at the age of 32, but before she passed, she created a trust fund for you. The money has been invested and reinvested over the years. It's in a farmer's bank account under the name Elizabeth Patterson Trust. Attorney Marcus Thompson has all the documents. You are the heir to approximately $800,000 as well as a 15-acre estate outside Salem. Esperanza read the letter 3 times. Then, with trembling hands, she searched the envelope. There was more. A faded photo of a young woman holding a baby. On the back, someone had written, Elizabeth and Esperanza, 6 months, 1944. The baby had her eyes. The woman had her smile. Thomas knew everything, the letter continued. He asked me to keep this secret until God showed the right moment. Forgive us for hiding the truth, but some revelations must come in the Lord's time. Have you ever discovered that your entire life was built on a secret that would change everything? The next morning, Esperanza donned her best dress, the navy blue she wore on special occasions, and drove to Marcus Thompson's office. The elderly but sharp-minded lawyer greeted her with the reverence of someone who has guarded a sacred secret for decades. Hope, he said, his voice breaking. I wondered when this day would come. He opened an old safe and removed a thick folder. Inside were documents that proved everything the letter had revealed. The trust fund, now valued at $1.2 million. The property, which had appreciated and was now worth over $600,000. Investment certificates, stocks, government bonds. Her biological mother was an extraordinary woman, Marcus said. She worked as a seamstress until her death, but she invested every penny she saved, thinking about the future of the daughter she had to give up. Esperanza held the papers with hands that no longer shook. He wanted to, but Elizabeth made him promise he would only reveal it if you really needed it, if the family that raised you wasn't enough to care for you in your old age. The old lawyer smiled sadly. It seems the Lord knew this moment would come. Have you ever felt God preparing an answer to your pain before you even knew you needed it? Esperanza left the office not only with the inheritance documents, but with crystal clarity about what she would do next. It wasn't revenge that was growing in her heart. It was justice. God's justice, which never arrives late. For 2 months, Esperanza moved quietly. She quietly purchased 3 houses on Salem's main street. Houses that were being foreclosed on by families who had lost their jobs during the economic crisis. In each house, she placed a needy family, charging a nominal rent of $50 a month. He created a scholarship fund for underprivileged church youth. He made an anonymous donation of $200,000 to the local hospital to expand its charity wing. And most importantly, he quietly purchased the land where Samuel planned to build his new business, a mechanic shop that would be the realization of his lifelong dream. Samuel didn't know it, but for months he had been negotiating with his own mother's agents. The day of truth arrived during Sunday worship. Esperanza had asked Pastor James to speak a few words before the closing prayer. She stepped up to the pulpit wearing her best outfit, carrying a small wooden box. Church, my name is Hope Patterson. Many of you know me as Thomas's widow, Samuel's mother, who works at the town garage. The congregation murmured softly. Hope was not known for attracting attention. Today I came to share a testimony that needs to be heard, a story about how God prepares blessings even when we are not seeing them. She opened the box and took out Margaret Whitfield's letter. For 73 years, I believed I was an orphan, that God had abandoned me as a baby. But I discovered that He was preparing an inheritance that I didn't even know existed. Samuel was in the third row frowning. Joanna was whispering nervously to her sister-in-law. I discovered that my biological mother, Elizabeth Whitfield, worked her entire life to... Esperanza smiled for the first time in months. A genuine smile, full of peace. Son, you don't need to understand. You just need to accept that a mother's love and God's love doesn't depend on merit. It depends on grace. She took the deed to the land, already transferred to Samuel's name, out of the box, and stepped down from the pulpit. But I want you to know something, she said, stopping before him. Love doesn't mean being invisible. It means being seen for who we truly are, children of God who deserve dignity. Samuel began to cry right there in front of the entire congregation. Mother, forgive me. Forgive Joanna. We didn't know. Now you know, Hope said simply. And knowing, you can choose to do things differently. The entire church rose to its feet in applause. But Hope wasn't interested in applause. She was interested in restoration. Have you ever seen God turn your greatest pain into the greatest blessing for someone who hurt you? 6 months later, Samuel's auto repair shop was the most prosperous in Salem. But the biggest change wasn't in the business. It was in the family. Sunday gatherings at Esperanza's house resumed, but now with a sacred protocol. Everyone arrived at 2 p.m. Everyone helped set the table, and everyone, without exception, participated in the prayer of thanksgiving before dinner. Esperanza discovered that the sweetest revenge isn't making the other person pay for what they did to you. It's making the other person realize how much they lost when they chose to ignore you. And he also discovered that God sometimes prepares inheritances that go far beyond money. He prepares inheritances of the heart, which transform entire families and teach that true love cannot be achieved through merit. It's achieved with grace. And grace, my dears, is what God gives us when we least deserve it, but need it most. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment telling us if you've ever had to forgive someone in your family. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that show how God can transform our greatest pain into our greatest victory. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever discovered that God was preparing something greater than you could ever imagine? Hit that notification bell, because in the next story, I'll tell you about the man who discovered that his father had been keeping a secret in the basement for 40 years. What he found down there changed not only his life, but the fate of an entire town. What secret was buried in that basement? Why didn't her father ever tell her the truth? And how did God use this discovery to bring healing to a family that seemed lost? Come back here to find out. In the meantime, remember, God sees when you're ignored, knows when you're hurt, and is preparing an answer that will surprise everyone, especially you. Because everything